What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? I hope everyone's having a great weekend so far. I hope everyone is having safe travels. I know it's that weekend, so I know a lot of y'all are going to be traveling. So, as of right now, we're going to be talking about what the Supreme Court has done. So, affirmative action is now officially been struck down by the Supreme Court. So, now we're going to be discussing how this is going to affect the Black community, what steps the Black community needs to do, and how this is tied into what we have been saying for quite a while. So I'll give people a little bit more time to come in, and then I'm going to give my 2 cents on the Supreme Court's affirmative action decision. All right, everybody. It's been about maybe a minute and a half. So I'm going to get into this and feel free to tune in. I'm going to put the link in for those who maybe want to join in the future to give their thoughts, give their opinions, and what they see, what impact do they see this is going to happen. So let me put this link to those who want to participate, and I will get into my monologue about Supreme Court's actions and what do we do about it? All right, y'all, the link has been officially put in. You can come on in when you feel comfortable. So basically, the crux of this argument is the Supreme Court has officially overturned or officially struck down affirmative action. So what that basically means is that colleges and universities can no longer use race as a factor in college admissions. So before affirmative action, race was taken into consideration, and for the most part, affirmative action has had a huge impact on the African American community. It allowed for Black college students to get into college that otherwise would not. It made the representation of Black students on campus proportional to the population. And so, without affirmative action, oftentimes the Black population is going to get a lot smaller in those universities, particularly elite universities, like your Harvards, your Cornells, your Caltechs, Monmouths, and Yales. That's where you're going to see the decrease in the percentage of Black students that make up the student body. Now, majority of Americans support the ban on affirmative action of restricting race in college admissions. And so this is where we're put up against. The Supreme Court ruled on it 6-3. Of course, we had it was very along the line of the conservative Supreme Court justices, your Amy Coney Barrett, your Clarence Thomases, that voted in favor of against affirmative action and in favor of it being removed. You had people like Ketanji Brown that condemned the banning of affirmative action or the consideration of race in college. So affirmative action is now gone, and that is now the law of the land. Now colleges may try to do it through, you may be able to consider race in an essay, but that's pretty much, and how you overcame race. But the pre this ruling is not going to come back. It was ruled unconstitutional. So my 2 cents on it was, I'm not surprised by this. We knew the Supreme Court was going to do something like this. The Supreme Court has always made it, the conservative Supreme Court has made it apparent that they wanted to get rid of this affirmative action long before the decision was actually made. We've had affirmative action cases come up before. I think if you remember Abigail Fisher, she was the one in Texas that wanted to strike down affirmative action, saying that it was discriminatory against white students. Which is one argument they use. Another argument that they use is affirmative action is against Asian students, and that if affirmative action was removed, there would be more Asian students in the student body. Now, the movement that was backing this to get affirmative action removed was not really instituted by the Asian community, although we have seen Asian faces becoming the face of the movement. I don't know why they like being used as sort of the faces of this. It was actually a white man by the name of Ed Blum that was really pushing this movement behind the scenes to get affirmative action struck down. With that, we knew this was coming to a certain degree. Yep, California had got rid of affirmative action. It had been, even in liberal California, as they so to speak, affirmative action was voted on and it was struck down. So good point from the mud that affirmative action had been struck down in the state of California, a solidly blue state. So it was a long time coming. Kevin Camp, what affirmative action was it was an attempt to correct injustices that had happened to African Americans. And that was especially when African Americans were being excluded from predominantly white spaces, especially, elite institutions, but in other factors such as employment, that there needed to be some sort of action done to reverse those harms. So what affirmative action does is basically considering race as a factor in employment, or taking race into consideration with college admissions. We're considering the fact that certain communities have been disproportionately harmed, and we're going to take that into consideration. So that's what affirmative action really is. Yep, that is true. It was a pump fake to correct injustice based on race, and they threw in gender to make white women could take most of the money and bring it back to the white community. That is true. The biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women. It's actually not black people. That was the intent of affirmative action, but of course, affirmative action benefits most white women. So, we'll see how this impacts the white women community in the upcoming future. But my whole 2 cents on this is it goes into what we have been saying for a long time. I do not see America being serious about trying to correct the harms that have been done to the African American community. I see that oftentimes America has, whether or not implicitly or explicitly, embraced the race blind narrative, that there's no such thing as race, everybody's equal, the civil rights movement made everything equal. And so now we don't really need to be considering race like that. We need to be focusing more on class, as some people have made in their arguments. This goes into the argument that we need autonomy. We need self-determination, because if we were in that position of being autonomous, being self-determining, being able to control our own destiny, we would need to have affirmative action. But because the fact that we're not in that situation, we we have to rely on affirmative action because we're not in a position where we control our fate. We don't control the economy. We don't control politics. We don't control the institutions. So basically, we are at the mercy of this society, and we're hoping that the society has a sense of conscience and a sense of understanding of what we need. And based on this ruling, that hasn't happened. It's probably not going to happen. And for the do it right here, integrationist, assimilationist, this is a defeat. But for me, it just affirms what we've been talking about, which is you need to have a government. I mean, you need to have your own government. You need to have our own society where we can control our own fate. I mean, look at these reports. I mean, I want you guys to just look at these headlines for the most part. Some of them make sense to me, but some of them are just like we kind of already knew this. Um, so if you look at this, as I stated before, most Americans approve of it. Maybe a slight majority, but majority of them approve it. As you see, this is what we're doing. And of course, Clarence Thomas, one of the biggest hypocrites in this whole story. He was a benefactor of affirmative action. He benefited when he went to Yale, when he got his education, and he went and did a 180, and he pulled that ladder up and said that affirmative action shouldn't be considered, which is grossly hypocritical. But we know Clarence Thomas. This is what he does. This is what he's been doing for the last nearly 40 years. So, this is where we're at. And it's quite funny right here. They say that affirmative action is going to hurt some Asian Americans. And again, this goes back into trying to hurt Black people, and then it ends up hurting everybody else. Because you think it's just going to hurt Black people, but it's going to hurt everybody else. Because again, or to consider, in this particular situation, when people say, "Oh, it hurts the Asian community is not a monolith. Not all Asians come from the same country. Asian cultures are vastly distant. The countries that the immigrants that come to the U.S. from particular countries are more likely wealthy. If you're Taiwanese, if you're Japanese, if you're Korean, if you're Chinese, but if you're someone who's Hmong, if you're somebody who's Vietnamese, if you're somebody who's Thai, you're not gonna have a lot of money most of the time when you come to the United States compared to the ones that I mentioned before: Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, Taiwanese Americans who have more money. So again, getting rid of affirmative action obviously is going to hurt Black people. It's going to influence decision making for Black students, but like I said, it's going to hurt other groups. And this goes into when you try to hurt Black people, you end up going against your own interests. And that's what we're seeing. I also want to get to the point that with Clarence Thomas, this is what America creates. America is a system that is built and meant to create somebody like a Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is the prototype of what America creates, ideally wants to create out of every Black person. There was if the American he said that's what the whole point is, not to hurt Black people because we never really benefited from it. Yeah, I mean that's just the truth. It's people act like we benefit the most from it. It goes into those stereotypes, brother. Oh, if we cut welfare, it's going to disproportionately affect Black people. Yes, black people might be disproportionately, but the majority of people on welfare are not black, they're white. If we get rid of food stamps and all this, it's gonna harm black people the most. And black people may be disproportionately affected, but we're not the majority on food stamps. That's white people. So trying to hurt black people and in the end going up against their own interests and hurting themselves is standard American protocol. But to get back to Clarence Thomas, Clarence Thomas is America's darling. If we were to look at the ideal person that America would want every black person to be, it's Clarence Thomas, a black person who is racially has racial self-hatred, distances himself from blackness, wants nothing to do with blackness, embraces the white conservative ideology. That's what America ideally wants everybody to create, wants every black person to be or wants to create. And so, we can't. I mean, for me personally, we can't be upset. I'm not really upset at Clarence Thomas. I really much, honestly, with American politics, I'm not surprised, and I don't have a vested interest as much as I used to because this is to be expected. AA's was about Asians outcompeting whites, particularly white women. Yeah, we can make that claim. Yeah, yeah, we that's a valid argument. That is a valid case. Because again, Asian students tend to outdo white students, so they would have a higher representation. They might have more representation than the white population. So you're right. It's getting back at them. For Clarence Thomas, he is what we in the BAIO call the Negro manufacturing machine. That's who he is. He is the product of the Negro manufacturing machine. Black people who are radical are not going to get on the Supreme Court. That's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Black folks who are anti-black, who are against the interests of black people, are going to get selected by the Supreme Court. That's why Clarence Thomas is America's ideal boy. He's their ideal. He represents everything what America wants to be when it comes to black folks. Pick yourself up by your bootstrap, love America, distance yourself from blackness, black politics, have any sense of collective responsibility. That's what they want. And we need, Thurgood Marshall is as good as it's gonna get. Thurgood Marshall was, and it's sad that Clarence Thomas replaced Thurgood Marshall. I hate that. That Clarence Thomas replaced Thurgood Marshall. And we know what he did to Anita Hill. And yet this man was still put on the Supreme Court. And made it his mission to unravel everything. Clarence Thomas is peak black white supremacist. Peak anti-black. He married a white woman whose role model was Phyllis Schlafly. Mother ran for office. Attended the Ronald Reagan Republican nomination in the 80s. Somebody who was an instrument in January 6th. This is the man that replaced Thurgood Marshall. This goes back into why we need our own government, our own society, and self-determination. If we had our own society, our own government, a Thurgood Marshall would be the bare minimum. He wouldn't be the best that it's gonna get. He would be the bare minimum. Clarence Thomases would never be able to stand on the Supreme Court of our society if we were self-determining. Clarence Thomas would never exist. But it's within this context, this social, economic, and political reality that you get a Clarence Thomas. You get the anti-black people who are touted by conservatives. I've seen a lot of conservatives defending Clarence Thomas, saying he's a strong black voice. He's the Supreme Court justice version of Tim Scott, Ben Carson, Kimberly Klacik, Candace Owens. He's the Supreme Justice equivalent of that. And so I think as black people, we need to be less upset about these rulings and really focus on what we're going to do. Focus on how we can build for ourselves self-determination, how we can understand that, listen, this is not the best. We're not in the best circumstance. We're not in the best situation. This is not the best environment for us to succeed. We need to go somewhere where we can control our fate and our destiny. We have the sole determining factor on who gets to be nominated as Supreme Court justices. America is going to keep producing Clarence Thomases. And the Clarence Thomases are going to keep getting on the Supreme Court because that's what is acceptable. That's what the American political establishment and status quo is going to accept. We need to accept that. They want people that are black that de-emphasize blackness, de-emphasize the black community, the black struggle, black liberation. I wouldn't even say really black liberation, but black people getting an equal share or equal proportion in the American society. Affirmative action was a long time coming. It's gone. It is what it is. Now, what are we going to do about it? What conclusions are we going to take from this? Because again, majority of Americans support this. It had been struck down in California. This was a long time coming. The Supreme Court is super conservative. They're going to rule more conservative in the upcoming cases. That is to be expected. All I want to know is, what is our conclusion? What are we taking from this? Are we taking that, listen, this is what it's going to be. This is what America wants. And we need to go somewhere else. Or is our message going to be, we need to keep fighting, keep begging, and keep hoping that America will understand us? Big facts. Clarence Thomas was a pro-black nationalist slipped on his head by the loneliness at the top for black tokenism. People like that would not exist in our nation. He wouldn't be a creation. It was the American system that created him. So you're right. He wouldn't be in our own society, in our own nation. Clarence Thomas would not be considered. He wouldn't be created. It is now time to to focus on higher education within our community, it's now time to start going back to HBCUs. A lot of Black students have been going to HBCUs in recent years. I was in college when there was a massive upsurge in interest in Black students going to HBCUs. The thing about it is about HBCUs is that HBCUs can't really accommodate a lot of Black students. It's like only about 230,000 of the 1.3 million, 230,000 Black students attend HBCUs. Over 1.3 million Black students attend PWIs. If you just took like not even half, but just 10%, HBCUs literally could not handle that influx. And so that requires a lot of infrastructure. And so that requires a lot of investment. But is the government really going to invest in the HBCUs? Because most HBCUs are publicly funded. I mean, yes, you do have alumni, but HBCU alumni and endowments are significantly smaller than, let's say, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, that have endowments in the billions of dollars. I mean, Harvard has an endowment of 35 billion. Howard only has an endowment of 600 million. So we would like to see in a sort of a thing that people could do, go to HBCUs, but HBCUs have to be able to accommodate. Then you got to factor in what HBCU they go to, because if you go somewhere like I attended North Carolina A&T, there's only a certain percentage of out-of-state students that can go there. And so you're not going to be able to have, in a situation like North Carolina A&T, the largest HBCU in America, where you can have that massive influx of Black students because they're out of state. And so there's only a certain percentage before they cap it. You said, or we can always migrate to one part of Alkebulan. I swear I need to be able to pronounce it. Alkebulan. Build that like we built America. We can rebuild that in the motherland, and that's what we here at in the BL are focused on. Going to that one part of Africa, Alkebulan, Liberia, and building it up. That should be our focus. As Hollop would say, all hands on deck. We need to be building it up there, building those institutions up, creating those institutions there so that we can put our Black children in good positions and in good situations. So they don't even have to think about affirmative action because the system they're in, it naturally benefits Black people and is naturally geared towards Black people. They don't have to be desperate about getting into white spaces or trying to be included. They're going into a system in an environment where it's theirs. They control it. They are the drivers. Our black children should be going to Liberia, going to the University of Liberia, going to the university, going to William B. S. Tubman University, going to a university in Grand Bassa, going to a university in Lofa, in Nimba, in Grand Jita. There should be a university in every county in Liberia that Liberians can attend and that African Americans can come and get their education, and it's top notch, it's top quality. They can do everything. That's what we need to be focusing on. That's why this affirmative action case is just proves our point. We need somewhere of our own. We need it. America ideally wants a race-blind approach. America really does not want to deal with the Black problem, or in the earlier days they called it the Negro question. America does not want to deal with that. America will do whatever it takes to harm Black people. Even if it hurts other people along the way, they are determined to do things that will hurt Black people or have the intent, the original intent of harming Black people. Affirmative action was no benefit to blacks. Everyone else benefited off the fight of blacks. Yeah, correct. Affirmative action didn't benefit. I mean, it benefited black people to a certain extent, but it wasn't the same as, let's say, for white women who were the largest recipients of affirmative action. It did. I mean, for universities like Harvard and Yale and Cornell and the Ivy League, so to speak, it allowed more black people to be proportion to the population. So it would be like 14, 13, 12% reflective of the black population in America, whereas beforehand it was like 6, 7, 9% of the population, much lower in proportion to the actual black population in America. But you're right in that the recipients who most likely to benefit from this are white women. I mean, that's a known fact. But anything that gives black people the slightest benefit or has the perception of being exclusively for black people is where you see the anti-black sentiments come roaring out. America don't want to accept or want to give black people anything that is perceived as just for black people. America wants things to be race neutral. Forget about everything in the past. It's, as they would say, it's 2023. You know, segregation is over. We need to be race neutral. We shouldn't be treating, you know, one group more favorably over the other. There was even a case where a black man said, you know, well, you know, yeah, racial injustice happened, but we need to treat black and white Americans equally. Again, this is what the American system creates. This is what the American system wants. So it is what it is. What we gonna do about it? Peace, everybody in the chat. Peace, Tony. Peace, Terrence. Peace, Mr. IG3 Black Reparation Nation. Like I said, I put the link in if you want to come in and give your opinion. I've really given my soapbox. I've really given my, you know, gist on it. If anybody wants to come in, they can come in and give their thoughts and opinions. I've made my case. I've made my point why, you know, this just goes into why we need self-determination, why we need our own government, why, you know, you get somebody like a Clarence Thomas, you know, why the Supreme Court rejected it, you know. That's what happened. What's up, brother?
Greetings. Yes, this thing, something is really kicking off now. Unbelievable. White supremacy has pulled the most sophisticated move to date, covering both angles. So on one side, they're saying the title was it Students for Fair Admission? So that political activist group was the ones that actually got the Supreme Court to overturn that decision. And then on the other side, they're saying, if I'm understanding it all correctly, that it's okay in terms of legacy. Is that correct? So you can keep.
Yes, you can still do legacy admissions, but you can't consider race.
Unbelievable. So therefore, it sounds to me like, listen, when it comes to fighting and death, yes, you darkies can join the military. You know, you can join the military. You know, we don't mind that in the military. But you see, the legacy is going to be all those white people, that the system of white supremacy and its impact on the military. Because of the legacy, that means they'll be able to say, well, my father's father was in the military and he was a general, so therefore it's okay to keep that white value, to keep whiteness as in rank, but allow non-white people to join the military, but not necessarily go up through the ranks. Is that what you're getting from the legacy?
So legacy admissions is more dealing with college. It's not really much in the military, but more in college. So what affirmative legacy admissions do in college is if your parents attended to, let's say, Harvard, you're more likely to get in Harvard, even if, let's say, your grades or your extracurricular activities aren't up to par, simply because your family member went to Harvard or went to Yale. So if
Right,
you are, for example, Harvard's acceptance is like 5%, 5 or 4%
right,
if you are just the average person. But if you're a legacy person, you
right,
have a 25 to 30% chance of getting into Harvard and Yale if your parents went there. Most students that go to Harvard and Ivy Leagues are legacy admission. Most of them come from the top 1%, the top 0.1% of society. You look at their income brackets, their families are making 200,000, $1 million a year. So really, what this is they really want to aim to get less black students because they feel like the black students, let's be real, should not be there. That they
right.
only got there because of affirmative action.
I thought the legacy was applying to the military.
No, no, a legacy that is not applying to the military.
So I'm a bit confused. So so affirmative actions only applying for education, but not for the military. Affirmative affirmative
Yeah,
action.
yeah. Most
I'm
of the time, it's
confused.
referring. Most of the time, it's referring to college. Sometimes it can refer to employment, but the biggest pet peeve for this Supreme Court decision was college, not so much the military or really much employment. Although affirmative action has occurred in employment, the biggest determining factor that is currently being discussed right now is college admissions.
Right, right. Okay, so this it's focused on
Oh
college
yeah, oh
admissions.
yeah. And Richard Dixon made a good caveat. Affirmative action has been struck down in colleges, but it has not been struck down by military academies. So just
Right, right.
a
So this,
caveat.
right, right. So what's the impact of that then? So it's struck down in colleges, but not in the military. So what does that actually mean?
So it means like in the case of military academies, since military academies are colleges of the military is, they're still going to consider affirmative action for black students. So they're still going to try to make the population proportional to the national population. So instead of, military academies may have dropping to like 5% black or 6% black, you're going to have a situation where at West Point in the Naval Academy, the population is still going to be 7.1%. I mean, 14%, 13%, 12%. They're still going to keep that population proportional because they want to consider the population as a whole in proportion to the black population.
Right,
Whereas
right,
in private administrative colleges that are sort of on their own whim, or even universities in statewide, they're going to take race less into account. So that is something to consider. If you're going to a military academy like West Point, like USAFA, like the United States Naval Academy, affirmative action is still going to be considered. But
right,
if you're going to Harvard, Yale, Cornell, it's not going to be so much. And I expect the black population is going to decline. That happened in California with Caltech. That has happened again before affirmative action. Black students were virtually invisible in those Ivy League schools. So I just expect that it's just going to be less black students on campus.
right, right, right. So your overall summary of the whole situation is that it's going to be worse for black people coming up in the future as a result
Yeah,
of
it's
this.
gonna disproportion. It's gonna impact black people. Obviously, black people are not the biggest recipient of affirmative action, but it's going to affect black people significantly.
Right,
Um,
right,
don't be surprised if you see Harvard's black population drops from like 13% to like 2% or 4% in the
right,
future.
right,
Don't be surprised if you see that. It's
right.
most likely gonna happen.
Right. So to the question that you asked in this stream, affirmative action is gone. Now what? Uh, so this is what I say. Now what? Now is the time to promote black nationalism and to no longer uh, make an effort to fit in. Black people must realize that it's it's a white supremacist infrastructure world construct, and for many years they've been fighting to be accepted. I mean, the first phase, correct me if I'm wrong, the first phase was, okay, we were animals. Black people are animals, so we're along with the stock. Horses, Negroes, stock. We were animals. We were not people. Yes, and then
Hmm.
as a result, yeah.
Yeah, correct.
So
Go ahead.
right. So then progress. Black people have been trying for so long to be considered as human. Why? Because if they get considered as human, then they get access to justice. I mean, you can argue for justice and courts and rules and stuff like that. You see, dogs and cats and cows don't argue for justice; they're just animals. So if the black people can move from animals to humans, then they should have access to justice and therefore get better treatment. So that's why there's huge effort. I'm a man. I'm a man. We're human. We're human. We can read. We can think. Yeah. So trying to get access to the justice system. So then they moves up a level. They say, okay, well, you're humans of a sort, maybe 3/5 of a human, um, and then uh, you're trying to get justice within the system, but the legal system itself is impacted by the system of white supremacy. So you're still back in that loop. So how I'm looking at it, it's almost like we have to kind of go in reverse and say and opt out. Say, okay, I'm stock. So I'm stock with a certain value. All right. So therefore, we have to organize as stock. In other words, no, we don't have to be recognized by their system. We don't care if they see us as human. We don't care if we see that's them. That's them. That's their system. They built it. It's their construct. We have to now build a world of our own construct with our own value system. Um, does that make sense? What I'm saying there?
Yes, you have to build your own system. You have to control your own reality. You can't hope to be. You can't get humanity in a system that was never meant and designed to treat you as human beings. America
Right.
has shown us constantly that they don't care about our plight. They don't care
Yes.
about trying to make amends or owe. And so at
Yeah.
some point, you got to throw in the towel and say, listen, but
Yes.
assimilation integration is not going to work.
Yes.
That is just the reality.
Right. Right. And so now, if black people say, okay, it's thrown in the towel, I'm not going to try and assimilate into your system. You don't want me. It's okay. You continue. We'll go this way. We'll go our own way. When black people do that, they start to make progress. They start building towns, cities. You know, like you know what's happening. And then
Yeah.
then the white supremacists. I said, no, 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 no. We're trying to accommodate you, and then they try and bring you back in. They say, we'll treat you better.
Hmm.
We're going to treat you better. You see, so it's for us to say, no, no, you continue doing what you do, and then those of us are opting out. We're on our way. We're not going to try and fit in. We're going to be a sovereign entity, and then we can make treaties with you. We're not part of you. We are a sovereign entity, nation, whatever. We have to build that black nation, and
Hmm.
then do make treaties like all nations do, rather than trying to fit in to the system of white supremacy, which is basically is a nation.
In this situation, when we as Black people try to integrate into this system, and I've always, when I was younger, had it, I thought that was what we should be doing, but then I realized over time, that is very, very dangerous. I used to be a huge Obama supporter, but then once I hit high school, like just a few years ago, like 2015, 2016, I was like, I despised Obama, because the thing about it is, when you are a Black person and you are integrating or trying to integrate into this system, assimilate into the system,
Yeah,
you're going with the status quo. Like I stated earlier, America produces Clarence Thomases. They want Clarence Thomases to be what every Black person should be. So when a Black person gets a position of power, they act more like Clarence Thomas. They,
right.
they they just do, because that's how they got there. They're not going to be able to get there by being some black militant black power person. That's
Yes,
not going to happen. So,
yes,
the only way that you can produce great Black leaders is to have a system where Black leaders are nurtured, a system where you can have, your Martin Delaney's, your James Theodore Holly's, and not producing a manufacturing machine, basically an assembly line of Clarence Thomases, of Candace Owenses, of the Brandon Tatums of the world. You have to have your own system. I want to get to this question right here from Brother Baruti, who's been a great, great followers of ours. He says, comment on the fact that AAs don't make up the average SAT and GPAs of third tier state supported PWI applicant pools. AAs are high scores at first tier PWIs, just not as high as Wazungu. Obviously, yes, in most situations, African Americans may not have as high SAT scores and ACT scores as white people do. But under you know this well, Baruti. It comes down to really just you know our schools. Because we live in America, our schools are very underfunded. Most of us go to public schools, and public schools tend to be underfunded. We don't have the resources. We don't have the SAT, the ACT preps. We don't have the
right.
SAT and ACT classes. So oftentimes, the Black students usually underperform at these state institutions, or the average student maybe underperforms in compared to maybe first tier, and even first tier, do slightly, at average, or just slightly below, because it comes down to resources. We're not we're not put in good environments for our children and even students to succeed. We're just not there. So I think that, I understand people will make the point, yeah, race, it should be considered, because look, these Black students are not meeting, the necessary SAT scores. But at the end of the day, we have to look at, again, the context of which they live in, the zip codes that they live in, the schools that they attend.
Exactly.
Just, they're not having the resources. You can't compare a student, like in the case of me, where I had access to all of these resources. I had the SAT and ACT books. I could take a SAT and ACT prep course. I could take all of those and have those resources for me to at least get a chance to have a high SAT score. If you don't have these resources and can't afford them, I mean, you're not going to do very well. You're just not going to.
Yes, and then and in order for um, black people to build universities and places and environments where black people can do well, they have to construct it themselves rather
Hmm.
than keep trying all that energy trying to fit in. No, you're not going to fit in. Forget it. It's over. Build your own. That's the only way. That's the only way. Start from scratch and build, because it's been done before. It's been done before.
I mean, we have seen it over and over and over again for hundreds and hundreds of years. We can talk about it, after the American Revolution. We can talk about it during Reconstruction, post Reconstruction, Jim Crow. America has never made a concerted effort to fully incorporate Black people. It's never been their intention.
And it never will.
Yep, it is. It is what it is. I mean, it's just the truth. I mean, the founders made that clear from the get go. Um,
Yes.
George Washington made that clear. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, um, Abraham Lincoln, Stephen Douglas, George Wallace, Thurman, um,
Yeah.
you name it. America has made that known that it's been anti-black. They've never seen Black people as citizens of this country, as first class citizens of this country. And just, we have to accept reality. I accepted that a long time ago, years ago, and now understanding that, I'm not really upset. I'm more focused on what needs to get done. I
Exactly.
think that us focusing so much on America is why a lot of Black people are getting depressed, or getting, dealing with a lot of PTSD. Um,
Yeah.
and are stressed out because they're trying to figure out what way can they get into the system or make white America come to reality, or sort of come to their understanding. And just that hasn't happened. I mean, we see right now it's 2023, and you got the Republican Party that wants to get rid of critical race theory, which is not even taught in schools, or with the African American studies class, oh, that shouldn't be taught, it should be banned. I mean, this is what we're up against. You have the Moms for Liberty trying to get rid of Black authors in libraries, and just we know this is going on, and yet we still feel like we have to want to assimilate into America. And I want to keep saying this, emphasizing to those. I understand that people will say we helped make America what it is, but at the end of the day, you have to understand the context to which that was created. It was against our will. Our ancestors did not enjoy that, and those
Exactly.
ancestors who maybe did want to, say this was our country. Most of those Black people who did that, and I emphasize this importantly, were the minority. When we talk about, people say the majority of African Americans wanted to stay in America, that is patently false, because it depended on region. And most of those Black people who wanted to stay in America, especially in the beginning, were in the North. And at the time, only about 10% of the Black population, less than 10% of the Black population lived in the North. The overwhelming majority lived in the South. And in the South, majority of them wanted to have their own homeland, or at least have that option. So we
Yeah.
need to be careful about this notion that we always wanted to be here, and we always wanted to be American citizens. That hasn't always been the case throughout Black history. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we'll be. The sooner we understand, yes, we may have contributed, but we did not. I said we contributed. We built the economy. We didn't build the structure. We
That's
had
right.
we were the building blocks. I always use the analogy. Black people are the architects and engineers on a construction project. When you're on a construction project, you have the owner, you have the engineer, the architect, and you have the general contractor. The architect and engineer, they're doing the designing, they're doing the drawings. The general contractor is the one that's contracting, making sure they're getting, the paint, the masonry, and then you have the owner who is telling you what they want. America,
Right.
the American government, white America, is that owner. They're the ones who own
Right.
the land. They're the ones who are telling us what they want done, what they're going to do.
Exactly.
We were the ones who were designing, aka picking the cotton, or
Yeah.
doing the blacksmith. And white America were the general contractors. They were the overseers. They were the ones who were delegating tasks. They were doing
Hmm.
that, and we have to understand that we were not, in the driver's seat. We are the passengers. We're not the driver's seats.
So what do you think of this solution? This is a solution that a group of us here are working on. Well, internationally, because we're all linked, via the internet and so on. So it's the Caribbean, some people in America, Europe, and Africa. So this is the final solution. The final solution for Black Africa and the Black African diaspora is the construction of a black central bank, not a black bank, a black central bank.
I mean,
All right.
that's one of the end game. That's one of the end
That's
games.
right. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Yes. So, so a black central bank, to focus on the construction of a bank, it it allows for the whole black African world to be united. Why? Because when it comes to finance and money, people can still don't feel that their identity is being threatened. See? So you have all kinds of people using the same bank, the same high street bank. So if you construct an international black African and black African diasporan bank, right? All the tribes, all the clans, all the states, all the societies, what with all their various identities and values and cultural systems and traditions, they can unite on that one thing, because that bank, that central bank, will be the direct counter and negation to the system of white supremacy without um, without losing the moral high ground. The moral high ground is that whatever you're doing, whatever your plans are, they should be constructive. Yes, constructive. Yeah, not that you're trying to kill white people or destroy. No, no. Let the white people do what they're doing, and the black people do what we're doing, and then we can talk, negotiate, write treaties or whatever. It's all civilized through finance. See, so the whole thing without violence. And if you make a move towards violence, then you lose the moral high ground, and then you start losing power. So, plus having a black African and black African diasporan, or basically a bank for people of black African origin. By uniting on that, we can generate value in blackness. You see, so the system of white supremacy has value in whiteness. So because there's value in whiteness, then you'll have black people using skin cream to try and look white, or try and, so blackness as a negative. So so just like currency, there's the difference between money and currency. Money, you can see, currency is invisible, but in the invisible realm is a realm of value. So it's exchange rate, the exchange rate between whiteness and blackness. We've got to move the exchange rate, raise the value of blackness. Does that make sense? You're muted.
Yes, yes, it does.
Yes. So now, by raising the value of blackness in that project, we also bring in mixed race people, mixed black people. So in the project, if one of your parents is black and one of your parents is white, right? You're entitled to a 50% share uh, of reparation value. So let's put it this way: reparations is a legitimate form of income into the black central bank. Yes,
Yes.
it's a legitimate now, but the reparations in this model is not the same as the one that everybody knows about. This is unprecedented, what I'm going to tell you now. Reparations must come on a claim by claim basis. No big check, because there's no point getting a check of reparations to put it back into a white bank. You have to have a depository that you control. You need a sovereign entity to put the reparations in. So you need your own
So
bank. It's no point
basically,
getting.
what you're saying is you need a nation.
That's right. Yes. And then a nation. What is a nation without its own central bank?
It's not a
That's part
nation.
of a nation, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So a sovereign entity expresses its sovereignty by its own banks. That's why you have a central bank. A nation has its own central bank. So that nation has to be constructed before reparations can be processed. And I'm not even sure if the word reparations is the right word. It might be, I don't know. What it is, once you have a sovereign black entity, nation, then it will serve itself its own justice. Yes?
Yes.
So that nation will start to extract what it believes is owed to it or is due to it as it so decides. So it might call that extraction reparations, it might call that extraction, but it will take what it needs to take in order to serve itself for its good health. So I'm not sure if the word reparations is the right word, but does it make sense? Maybe that word can be used whilst talking to foreigners. Does that make sense?
Yes. I just want to get to some of these comments real
Go on.
quick. So he says, that is what China is doing. They focus on intellectual attraction and keeping their culture intact. We need to do the same. Um, Simon UGUK, the African Exim Bank funds infrastructure projects in Africa and open a branch in the Caribbean. Black people should financially support them. Black central bank isn't realistic unless it's an NGO. I think you can have a black central bank. It's just the African countries have to organize themselves. I mean, if all African countries are not on accord, then I mean the central bank. I mean, you can have every country has a central bank. I mean, Liberia has a central bank. South Africa has a central bank. But if you're talking about a currency that's back onto the continent, you need all African countries to get on board and make it their currency in intra-African trade. Terrence said, other than Liberia, what other African country in Africa is opening up to blacks through the diaspora? Most times I've seen some hostility towards black. So some people would say it's Sierra Leone as well. Ghana, people would say, although for me, I have my
I like the way
gripes.
you're thinking.
Uh, I have my gripes with Ghana a little bit simply because some of the reports and stories I'm hearing. Obviously, Ghana has been treating most well, but there has been some tensions. There has been some concerns going on in Ghana. You have South Africa. A lot of African Americans in South Africa. Usually in the two major cities, mostly in Johannesburg, but you also have some in Cape Town. But Liberia is really that one mega central place where no black person has ever been denied citizenship. Of course, Liberia has in its constitution, the non-Negro clause, which states that, only black people can be citizens and own land. So really, other than Liberia, I mean, really Sierra Leone would be the next one, second best option. And then I would choose South Africa, but I've been to South Africa, so a little bit of bias there. And then maybe Ghana if I were to rank them. Some people go to Tanzania, but not too much. I mean, they accept dollars, but citizenship is another story. Same thing in Ghana. some African Americans have gotten citizenship in Ghana, but a lot haven't. So, but in Liberia, no Black person has been denied citizenship. So,
Right.
that would be my answer to that question.
Okay. So let me address some of those points from my angle. So this project, the nearest, it's not the model, but the nearest to the model of what we're doing is what the Zionists did. Now, a group of people chose to identify themselves as Jews and then said that their organization represents all Jews. Yes, so they call themselves the Zionists. So it's just a small group, call themselves the Zionists, and their project was to do something for the good of all Jews.
Mm-hmm.
So the parallel is that you can have a group of Black people coming together and say they are doing something for the good of all Black people. Okay? Now, so this is just a group of people, right? So when it comes to nation building, right, that group of people that with that ideology
Mm-hmm.
has to touch the ground, yes,
Yes.
right, land. But well, watch this. The tactics the Zionists used, they said, okay, they got themselves together, and then a number of representatives went to governments, the British government, and said, we would like you to view in favor a homeland for the Jews. We're not asking you for any money. We're not asking you for anything. Weapons. All we're saying is for you to write a document as proof, as evidence that your government views with favor a homeland for the Jews. And with that document, they marched into Palestine or whatever. Okay, so a similar model could be that a group of Black people form an entity and then go visit the Liberian embassy and we said this entity that we have formed is for the Black betterment internationally, worldwide, globally, and also this entity that we have formed ourselves, this group, we also want to organize to process reparations for colonialism, for all aspects, for where we have decided Black people have been need justice. So this entity, this organization is being set up to serve justice globally to people classified as Black. So once you have this organization, then this organization can then go to the Liberian embassy and say, we're aware of your history and so what we'd like you to do, we'd like the Liberian government to write us a letter to say that Liberia views with favor the establishment of a Black nation or how can I say, or an entity with the specific purpose of extracting reparations for Black betterment. So, and then that same entity, that same group of Black people, they can go to Liberia and say, so you're getting one letter. We got a letter from so what it is, this group is starting to form a nation, starting to come into existence. Why? Because nations that are already in existence, if they recognize you, they bring you into existence. Yeah. So you're just a group of people. But if the Liberian embassy writes a document and says we recognize you and we want to support you in whatever you're doing, and then you go to Sierra Leone embassy and then they write something similar, and then you go to the Jamaican embassy, and then they write something as well, and then you go to Haiti. Yeah. So you go to all these governments, and as you're stacking up these documents, official documents written by governments, you, they constitute a currency, basically. Does it make sense what I'm saying? You're forming into something tangible, and those same governments, they might grant you a land or an embassy. You understand? So that is when the group starts to touch the real world. Yeah, because the Sierra Leone might say, we like what you're doing, we like what your group's doing. We're going to grant you this piece of land because it's your success is going to impact Sierra Leone. It's going to impact us. So we support you in what you're doing. We are
Mhm.
not you, but whatever you're doing, we view with favor. Does that make sense? I'm
Yeah.
facilitating a bit.
So yeah. So I'm just gonna make address this comment and then make a couple of points, and then we're
Yeah.
about to end this for today because I don't want to keep people too long. It says Liberia doesn't offer automatic citizenship to diasporas anymore. You're no more likely to get citizenship there than anywhere else. You just need to fulfill the minimum residency requirements. It's actually a lot easier to get citizenship in Liberia. Liberian citizenship is very easy to get in terms of naturalization, and we also can lobby for that since the Liberian government, especially the name on institution, wanted to grant automatic citizenship to African Americans, try to get them incentives to come back in 2022. The last thing I would say is in response to you, I don't even think we need to establish a black nation. I think Liberia was meant for that. I mean, you had African Americans go there, Afro Caribbeans, continental Africans go there. You had people from Guyana that came from there. So we really already have the black nation state in Liberia. The question is simply, do we claim it and just want to build it? We just need to renovate it. I mean, we already have the nation state. We even can claim Sierra Leone because Freetown was established by African Americans, Jamaican Maroons, and other people, Black Londoners. We already have the infrastructure there. The only question is, are we willing to claim it? And if we're willing to claim it and build it up, we can provide for our people, and we won't have to worry about begging to be included. We won't have to worry about affirmative action, trying to get in spaces that we're not wanting into, trying to fathom and deal with the fact that America creates, the Clarence Thomases of the world and people who are anti-black and don't care for the betterment of black people and distance themselves. It's only going to come with us having a nation state. So until we get to that point, we're going to continue to be stressed out. We'll continue to be frustrated. Remember, America is meant to create Clarence Thomases. This affirmative action case was a long time coming. So in conclusion, y'all, nationhood is the answer. Liberia is the answer. Sierra Leone is part of that equation, but Liberia is the answer, and that needs to be our focus. And with that, y'all, it was a great conversation. Make sure you guys like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys sign up to our website at baioafricstand.org/register. We have plenty of things going on, and we are planning to organize this movement and have as many people as possible. So remember, that is baioafricstand.org/register. Thank you, Terrence. Thank you, Vector. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Simon. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for coming on and giving y'all's opinions. Thank you guys so much, and there's more to come. And with that, y'all, have a great day. Peace.